Okay, so for today's project, it's called Selection City. Make sure you download, first of all, I've got some notes that are particularly for the selection tools we're using. There's the information that I just handed out to you, and there's a zip file that has several different images inside of it. And so when you download it, here's the zip file. These are the different buildings. We're going to be creating something using each one of these JPEGs. Also, you had last week's notes. We learned about the brush tools, working in layers and how they work together. Today we're going to be working in doing some basic layer effects using different selection tools. And if you miss something that I go over, this will kind of go over it again and where you can find the different tools. Let me show you today's project. So this is what essentially we're going to make. It's all these little buildings will be cut out and pasted into this one document. Check out our layers that we're working on. Notice how many layers that we have working in here, up to about 15 or so different layers, and some of them are copied. Some of them have little effects like a drop shadow to them. And so what we're going to do is work in layers, move layers around, and also be able to make selections for what we're working on. So if you'll follow along kind of in the instructions, I'll dock that back down there, close this out, and we're not going to save it. Yours doesn't have to look like mine. Yours, essentially, you can make it look as however you want. We're going to make a new document, and in our case, I've given you the dimensions for it. The width and the height is going to be 7 by 10. Do make sure that you're working in inches. Sometimes other people will be working on your computer and they'll change it to pixels or they'll change it to centimeters. Make sure inches is selected. So 7 by 10. Keep the resolution at 300. And we're working in CMYK mode. Do y'all remember what CMYK mode is? What it is and the difference?
It's colors, different colors.
Exactly. CMYK is for printing. RGB is for screen resolution. So if you're making something for a website, you use RGB. If it's printed, we're going to use CMYK. And we're going to keep everything else the same. We'll say OK to that. So here's our document that we're going to work in. Remember, everything has to be within this white area. You can click in the bottom and drag out, and this just gives you an extra border. Sometimes I like to have it, but you can't print, you can't even see anything within this particular area. If you follow along each of the little steps on the handout I give you, so on number 4, I tell you what JPEG to open up and what tool you'll be using. Some of these are easier than others, so I'll I don't want to say go quickly with them, but background is going to be the first one. First of all, excuse me, notice how I open up each one of these JPEGs. I click on the icon and I drag it to Photoshop, okay? And that'll open it up from here. If you have 2 documents opened, notice I've got my untitled one here and I've got my background on another one. You can click and drag it off, and then now it's opened in 2 different windows. That's how I want you to open up documents. Here's how I don't want you to open up. You can do this, but I don't want you to do it. Never click on, say, building 1 and drag it into here. It will open, but it's going to do something that's going to make it more difficult for you. It's creating what's called a smart object, and we're not going to get into those. So don't do that. Even though it looks right, it's not going to be right. So we're going to delete that and come back to here. So the first thing I need to do, I can open up both of these in a window, and if you drag them back, it'll dock them again. Sorry about that. I need to place this image into this particular area. We're going to use the rectangle marquee tool to do this. All the tools we'll be working with are found in the top quadrant of your toolbox. The marquee tools are these, and remember, if it has a little triangle, you can click and hold, and it pops out. So you got the rectangle, and you also have the ellipse. So we're going to use this one. The rectangle marquee allows you to select certain areas that you want to work in. So if I was to click and drag, in this case I'll just click and drag here, you can see it, and when I let go, has this kind of, this is why it's called a marquee. It's because it's got the black and white border, and this is the area that I have selected. Sometimes it's called marching ants. When I have my selection, if I click on the inside of it, I can move it around. as long as I'm clicking on the inside. If I click on the outside, it'll deselect it. So sometimes if I tell you to deselect, all you gotta do is click outside of it. What's interesting about making a selection, selecting an area, you can only affect the pixels inside of that area, okay? Here's what I mean by this. Let's say I chose my brush tool. And I started, I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger so you can see it. If I started painting with it, watch what happens. Paint, it only stays within that particular area that I'm working on. Make sense? So the selection tools, first of all, select areas of pixels. I'll undo that. So if I want to copy them, I've got this area selected. I can go to Edit and Copy. And then I can go to Edit, choose my new document, go to Edit and Paste, and it'll paste that area within my document. So what did I do wrong though? Did I get all of the image? I didn't get all the image, so let's go back and redo it. I'm going to delete this layer. First of all, notice I've got layer 1 selected by clicking on the little trash can. And it'll say, do you want to delete it? We'll say yes, and it's gone. So let's reselect the entire area. Click at the very top, drag over the entire thing. What's the keyboard shortcut for copying? Command C. Same thing for most all software. Command V to paste. So now it's pasted in there. Got my background working good. Another thing to pay attention to, when I paste something into a document, it's pasted into its own layer. So as I add things to here, you'll see how it adds more layers one on top of the other, which will play a big important role when we start moving things around and making other selections as well. So I've got my background. Let's close it out. Click on this. You don't have to save anything. We're just going to work in this one. So the next one I need to open up is our moon JPEG. Click and drag it down to Photoshop and release. And we'll even drag it off from here. Now with the moon, this is a square picture. I want to have a circular selection. And so we'll use our ellipse marquee tool. Remember, click and hold, and that gives you the pop out to do that. So if I click and drag, it may be difficult to see. Can y'all see the marquee on your screen? Okay. If I just freely move around, of course it's going to be elliptical. How do I get a perfect circle in Illustrator? Shift. So you do the same thing. Hold down Shift, and you can get a perfect circle selection in Photoshop as well. So with this one, Edit, Copy, and then paste it into here as well. So now I've got my circle on top of here. Notice my circle is in layer 2. The next tool I'll show you is if you wanted to move this to the top of your area, the Move tool, the black arrow in the top of your toolbox, allows you to select an area and move it around. So I can move it, change whatever size that it's in. Notice that I have layer 2 selected, and so it's only working on layer 2. I'm going to do one thing and I'll explain what I did. I'm going to turn off auto selection. Let's say I had, oh, I'm sorry, up at the top. I'll go back over it again too, but I've turned off auto select. You'll see what happens. Let's say I choose layer 1. If I click and drag, now I'm only moving layer 1. With auto select turned off, if I try to click on the moon, it's still selecting layer 1. If I turn auto select on, notice I'm on layer 1. Watch layer 2 be selected when I automatically click on it, and it moves it around as well. So I've written this on the board just to help you out. Be sure auto select is checked off. It'll make it a lot easier selecting things and knowing what layer you're on. 2 questions to keep in mind is what layer you're working on, so be sure you got the right layer, and also what selection you're working in within that layer. Okay? This is because it gets real complicated once you got a Photoshop file that's got 100 layers on it and you don't know which one you need to pick on. Choose auto select and it will automatically choose the one you want. Also, I turn off show transform controls. We're not going to use that, so make sure it's turned off. It just make it easier on you. Okay, so we got our moon, we got our background. Now let's have some fun. Let's add some buildings to where I'm doing it. Building number 1. So which is this one? Click and drag it down to here. With building 1, I want to be able to select just this building. I don't want to have the background, any of the gray area, just this area to work in. If you want to zoom in, you can use either the zoom tool. When you click on it, it'll make it a little easier to add on to it, so I'm going to zoom in. I want you to use the rectangle marquee tool. Now if I just clicked and dragged, it's going to select over too much. I don't want any of this, I just want this. So I'm going to deselect it. What you're going to do is we're going to select each little area and add on to it. And here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to, I'll tell you what, I'll start right here. Click and drag and just make one selection. Nothing major. To add on to it, hold down the Shift key. And do you see the little plus sign in the middle of it? That means now when I click and drag, I can add on to my selection. Shift key.
Say it one more time.
The Shift key. Yep. With the Shift key held down, click and drag, and it will add on to a selection. And so all I'm doing is holding down Shift, clicking and dragging. We'll back up. Shift, click and drag. It'll add on. See, I missed a little spot here. Shift. Same way here. And then click and drag. Make sure they overlap just a little bit too, so that all the pixels are selected. Cool? It's okay if it's off by a little bit. I won't count off for that. The main thing is you're adding on to a selection using the Shift key. By the way, if you want to subtract from an area, the Shift key adds, the Option key subtracts. So the Option, notice the minus sign? If I was to click and drag over this one, it will erase away that selection. Notice there's two different sides to it. So Shift adds, Option subtracts. Alright, with my building selected, Command C, copy, Command V, paste it in, and then use your Move tool to kind of place it. Have I lost everybody? Simple, simple stuff. So you doing that one for adding and subtracting away different things from that one. So that's the basic marquee tools. Rectangles and ellipses, they both do the same thing if you want to add onto a selection. Shift and Option to select and deselect from an area. So building 2 and 3 are going to get into our lasso tools. And you're going to use the lasso for each one of these. So let's drag it into here. I'll only show you one of them just to save time and move around from this one. So our lasso tool allows us to freely draw around an area. I could use my rectangle marquee, but that would be a little bit cumbersome. Instead, I want to be able to draw off around this one. Think of it like the pen tool in Illustrator, how you can give it point by point. So the Polygon Lasso tool is underneath this regular lasso tool. And that's the one we want to use first. It's got the little pointed edges. And just like the pen tool, you're going to click at each point that you want to make a line. So click once, and it'll have a line that connects to there. So every time I click, I'm just going to quickly go around the entire structure. I'm going to go quickly for you. So all I'm doing is clicking on each point, not having to hold down anything. Click, click, click. If you run out of room, you can bump your mouse down and it'll start scrolling. Get out of your way. Nothing special at this point, besides giving it the individual area. Okay, if I get back to my starting point, watch my cursor. See how it gives a little circle? It's going to close off. Now when I click at the starting point, I've selected that entire area. All cool? So Command C to copy it, Command V to paste it, and you can paste this and move it around. Whoops. Move it around there. So for this particular one, you're going to use the Polygon Lasso tool to go around the edges, all the little edges, and make your selection, copy and paste it over. Any questions about that one? Okay. I just did something I also want to explain to you. If you want to deselect an area without clicking off of it, another way to deselect is go under Select and Deselect. Notice the hotkey is Command D. And so that's just an easy way of deselecting something from up there. Okay, so that's the Polygon Lasso tool. But that was kind of cumbersome. I had to do a lot of clicking. Well, I want the computer to do a little more work than that. So let's use the Magnetic Lasso tool. If I had to do all the clicking that's on these little edges, that would take me forever. So the next lasso tool is called the Magnetic Lasso tool. And you'll see why it's called this. The Magnetic Lasso tool is going to look for the difference between two different colors, two different edges. So with this one, I'm going to click once to start it, and I'm not holding down my mouse. All I'm doing is moving it along the edge, and you can see it's automatically locating the edge. I'm just moving it. So no clicking, and it's adding its own little points, and I'm getting off by a little bit. But I'll show you how to clean that up. It's doing all the work for me, and I'm able to go a little bit quicker than it was before. Now I'll show you how to do an even better job than I'm doing right now. Okay, when I get back to the starting point, click again, and it makes the selection. Now you can see some areas where I got off right here, so I'll need to go back and clean that one up. For instance, I need to add on to this selection. Well, I can use my other selection tools to do that. If I chose my rectangle tool, what do I need to hold down to add on to a selection? Shift key. So Shift, and if I click and drag over it, now it cleans up that area. I need to delete away from this area. So what do I hold down? Option. Click and drag, and it erases away from that area. So you see how they kind of work together, and I would go back in and do a better job. Here's another thing to do I should have done at the start. I told you that the computer is looking for a contrast between two different edges. Here's where you can change the contrast. It was only looking for a 10%. So if you bring up your contrast to something like 50% or higher, it'll give you a much smoother selection that'll allow you to go a little bit faster. Same way with that one. Copy it, paste it into here. Y'all do a better job than I did. Move it around. You can overlap these. That's okay. It'll work out. Notice that I'm pulling these up off of the baseline because there are several that are going to be added to there from that one. So using the Magnetic Lasso for both of those to copy and paste them into there. Flipping over to the back. Even simpler than using the lasso tools. So you've got the Magnetic Lasso. By the way, the freeform lasso just allows you to click and draw into a selection. I'm sorry we didn't able to do that one. This one's just to help you out for this one. Okay, but for the next one, make it even simpler to make selections. In this case, didn't want to do that. I want to be able to quickly select these buildings. Instead of drawing around the edges, it'd be much easier just to tell it what colors I want to pick up on. Let me zoom in to this one. And these tools we're going to use are called the Magic Wand tool. It looks kind of like a magician's wand or maybe a firecracker going off. With the Magic Wand tool, this will allow me to click on certain areas of color, and the computer will select those like pixels. So for instance, these are all kind of the same color blue. Watch what happens when I click right in this area. Alright, well it made this selection of those colors of blue. Notice it stopped as it started to get to a darker area. The reason why is I need to give it a little bit more tolerance of color. And you can change that up here. So my tolerance is down at 10. Let's bump it up to something like 30. Usually 30 is pretty good to do. So I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to click in the same area. Let's see how much it picks up this time. Much larger area. Now let's even bump it up even further. Let's try 50. Same area. Now I'm getting almost the entire building. So you can see how changing the tolerance allows you to select more of the same thing. Now I've only selected the blue, but I need to select the rest of the building. So how do I add on to a selection? Hold down Shift. So this may take several clicks, but I'm holding down Shift and I'm clicking on different areas to select it. Click, 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 click. Getting the white, and I'm getting the darker area that's inside of it. Top areas, top areas. If you set your tolerance too high, it's actually going to wind up selecting the background too. That's not what we want. That's pretty good. So you can see in just a couple of clicks, I was able to select all of the pixels that are within this building. Command C, copy it. Command V, paste it. And place it wherever you want to be able to place it from here. There is one thing I want to make you aware of when using the this tool. I'll look at this one. We'll zoom in. Let's say, excuse me. Right now I have continuous selected, and when I click on it, it's going to look at all the pixels that are related to one another, that are continuously touching one another. If I turn it off, and let's say I wanted to, well, I'll tell you what, I'll turn it back on, and I clicked on this white area. Whoop. Let me drop down the tolerance. I'm going to make this work. All right. So if I click on the white area, it's only going to select those white pixels that are touching one another. Watch what happens if I turn off continuous. If I turn off continuous and I click, notice it's selected all of the white areas. That's because it's looking not just for ones that are touching, but all of them that are within our document as well. But even if I come up here, you can see these windows are also selected. So make sure continuous is checked off. It'll make your life a little bit easier in working with that. All cool for that one? Simple, simple stuff. Let's see, last one. Even simpler. We're going to use the magic wand, not magic wand, quick selection tool to select these buildings. Now I'll do the one at the bottom just to show you how easy it is. So I could use the Marquee tools to make the selections. I could use my lasso tools. The easiest one, the one I use most often, is the quick selection tool. This one will allow me to quickly paint over an area, and the computer will say, oh, you want to select these pixels, and it'll select the same ones. And it works kind of like a brush. Even notice at the top, I can change the size of my brush to give me an area that I want to work with. So for now, watch what will happen. I'm going to click and just drag over an area, and you can see very quickly it's adding on and building into those light pixels. Clicking and dragging, and you can see it quickly selects and adds on. All I'm doing is clicking and dragging. I don't even have to hold down the Shift key to add on to this selection. It automatically is doing it for me. So you can see in just a few clicks, it automatically picked up everything that's in there. Pretty cool. Makes your life a whole lot easier. All right. So with it selected, messed up on that one down there. Sometimes it'll correct. Copy it, go back over to the other one, paste it into here, and we'll place it down here at the bottom. Of course, yours will have a little bit more buildings than mine did. And you can move them around as soon as you're done from that one. The last thing is you're going to use multiple tools to select your tree. And I'm asking you to use the rectangle marquee and the magic wand tool. Let's see, so we'll open up the tree. So I'm going to ask y'all, let's see how well you can use this. If I had to use only the Marquee tool and the Magic Wand tool, how can I use both of those together to quickly select it? All right, I'll give y'all a hint. I'm going to start off with my Marquee tool. All right, I've selected my tree. Did I select it right though? I've got too much. How do I get rid of my background?
It's the magic wand.
Magic Wand tool. All right, so Magic Wand tool.
Subtract the white.
How do I subtract the white? Option. Hold down Option. It's going to select all of the white, because that's what Magic Wand does. It selects the same pixels. And so very quickly I was able to select this amorphous type shape by over selecting it and then deleting away what I needed. Did I lose anybody? Copy that one, paste it into here, and we're going to put the trees down on this side as well. Look at our layers. Look at all the layers that we have on within our palette. And every time I select one, it'll automatically jump to the one that I want because I have auto select turned on. Here's how you can make a copy of a layer. I want you to make several copies of the trees going along this area. First way to do it is to select the layer and to drag it down to the new layer icon. So I'm going to click and drag. And notice that it names it Layer 8 Copy. By the way, I'm using my Move tool. And now I've got a copy of it on top of this one. So now I've got two different trees. I'll even zoom in so y'all can see what I'm working on. Another way of doing it, how did y'all make a quick copy in Illustrator? Hold down the Option key. So I've got my Move tool, hold down the Option, and when I drag, I can make a quick copy of that one layer as well. So two different ways. You can either drag it down to here or hold down Option and make your copies of that layer from there. I lost anybody? Okay. Last thing that we're going to do is to add an effect to these to give them a little bit more contrast. Right now it's looking very flat. I want to give it some depth. I want these things to stick out from one layer to the next layer. To do this, we're going to add a drop shadow behind each of the buildings and each of the trees. So I need to select, let's try this building first. So I've got this building selected. Notice it's on layer 3. To add a drop shadow to layer 3, look at the very bottom for the FX symbol. When I click on it, these are several different effects you can choose from. The one we're going to use is drop shadow. And it's going to open up the options for the drop shadow. First of all, make sure the name is selected. You can select other ones, but just make sure it's there. And watch the effect happen on this layer as I make changes. You can move the distance, the size. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So as I move the size, do you see the drop shadow happening? The spread kind of shows, oh yeah, you can very quickly get a funky looking one. And the distance is how far away is it moving from there. You can also change the angle. Notice that it's moving off this angle. So if I change this angle, you can see where it's moving out from there. You can even, if you wanted to play around more, change colors and opacity. The main thing I want you to change up is the distance, the size, and the spread. And I even give you some specific numbers to type in. So let's see, a distance of 0, a spread of 45, and a size of 70. And so that was what your drop shadow is going to look like. We'll say OK to that. And what you're going to do is just select each one of the layers and add this drop shadow to each of the ones from here. And as you add them, oh, I'm sorry, I just did something a little bit different. So there, drop shadow, and that'll add the drop shadow to the layer you're working on for each of the layers. Let me show you what I just did, and to make sure you don't fall into this trap. If you happen to double click the blank space of a layer, so I'm going to double click this one, that will also bring up your effects that you can add to it. You can then click on the name drop shadow and it'll add the drop shadow or anything else. But pay attention, there's also some other things that we're not going to get into for today. For instance, the blending styles, drop or outer glow, different things like that. You can play around with those later. The main thing is you're just adding a drop shadow, and be careful not to double click on a layer to bring that up. As soon as you're done with this, of course, if you save it, so we'll go to File and Save As, the Photoshop format will save all of your layers. So you save a copy of it. I'll just call it Selection City as a Photoshop. We'll say OK to that. But what I want you to do is upload a JPEG. So we're going to save it again. File, Save As, change the format to JPEG. And notice that it even changes the extension at the top. And when we save that one, notice now it erased away all the layers. It flattened your image. And we'll say OK to that. And when you go to today's Moodle page, you can upload the assignment to Moodle, just the JPEG. All right? Any questions before we get started? Like I said, if you don't finish it today, we'll see if we can finish it up on Monday and make it easy for everybody else. I'll turn your computer back over to you. But y'all get started.